Do you know when I first moved to New York and I was totally broke? Sometimes I would buy Vogue instead of dinner. I just felt it fed me more. Okay, so my American accent is completely questionable, but there is no doubt that this quote from Carrie Bradshaw in Sex and the City is so iconic. First of all, every time I hear it, it makes me laugh. And second of all, it just speaks deeply to my fashion soul. Honestly, when I was a kid, I wanted to read my mum and dad's Vogues instead of fairy tale books, and I talk about this in my book, Opulence. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Faye, and we talk all things thrift, vintage, sustainable fashion, and what I like to call opulence. So we take secondhand, we reinvent it, and we turn it into first class chic. I've been sitting here this afternoon making some of my handmade cards that I create as love notes to my customers. I have an online store where I sell reimagined thrift, rare vintage, and really cool one-of-a-kind pieces. I make the cards using cutouts from all of my old Vogue magazines. It's actually very cathartic. It's kind of like my little craft-ernoon, and I just get to escape into the world of these Vogues. And as I was doing that, it got me thinking how much over the years magazines have taught me. And disclaimer, this is not a promo for Vogue. I wish it was. You can do this with any magazine, books, online if you like, but what I like about this is that it takes me off my phone and it takes me off my computer. It taps me back into old school inspiration. Remember when we used to read? Remember when we used to look at books? I think I personally rely so heavily on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and they're fantastic, but sometimes it's really great to just put all that away. So I wanted to share with you 5 things that Vogue has taught me. Let's tap into the wisdom as I make some cards. The first lesson that Vogue taught me is the power of getting to know designer DNA. And if you've been on my channel for a little while, you'll know that this is something that I talk about. And when I say DNA, I mean, what does a brand look like? So let's think about Chanel, for example. Chanel is famous for the tweed bouclé jackets, the padded quilted leather, the chain strap, the CC, the pearls, the striped Breton tops, all of those things. So when I'm thrifting and I see things that have that DNA or that personality, I know that I can look at recreating a Chanel inspired aesthetic. It's the same as when you think about a brand like Schiaparelli. Schiaparelli is very famous for that surrealist, abstract, avant-garde aesthetic, like my crying eye brooch that is on the cover of my book, Opulence, and I wear it all the time. Earrings like this that I'm just sending off to a customer. And it's got, you know, that kind of very surrealist, almost like Picasso sort of vibe about it. Black and gold is very Schiaparelli. So you could do a simple black dress and you could bling yourself out in kind of surrealist accessories, layer up belts. So it's all those things, thinking about what the DNA looks like. And having read Vogue for so long, over the years, the more that I flick through here, it's not just the editorial that has taught me. So not just the fashion shoots, it's actually the advertorials as well. So the ads, you know, like when you see a Valentino ad or you see a Gucci ad, you get to sort of, I guess, subconsciously study their DNA. Roberto Cavalli. You know, Roberto Cavalli has its own aesthetic as well. So the more that you look at these ads, I think it just kind of gets in by osmosis. And I've found over the years with thrifting that my brain is so attuned that I can just spot things that look like a high-end brand. And then that allows me to create looks with thrift, pre-loved, secondhand, vintage, that emulate that look. So it's been really powerful and really invaluable to just kind of soak all of that in. And, you know, growing up, I was definitely more in this world of magazines than I was online, even though I had the option. But I just really loved to look at the editorials. Edumacation. It's kind of like my fashion Bible. I think the second thing that Vogue has really instilled in me is tapping into my own creativity and kind of cutting out a lot of the noise of the internet. Today, we're so dependent on it, right? We're always on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest. And while I love all of those things, and they have been really helpful for my work and videos and my personal style expression, it's kind of clouded my judgment in some ways. I forgot to think for myself. I get too inspired sometimes by what I'm seeing, and sometimes I will just kind of copy that, right? Instead of using this and taking inspiration from certain eras or certain designers and kind of creating this melange or mashup of different ideas. And I think that's where true personal style can really lie, because you're not reliant on everything being fed to you. I find that, especially lately, since really focusing on my small business, I've been diving into my Vogues again to make my cards, which is a great way to reuse, save money. You know, starting a business and getting all your supplies is expensive, so it's a great way for me to use the things that I have. But doing that has reminded me how powerful this exercise actually is. It's tapping me back into, you know, fashion from the mid-2000s, the early 2000s, and just making me think differently, which I love. So I really encourage you to do that. Think about the inspiration that you could get away from the internet, away from online. Go for a walk, look at people on the street, go into a bookstore, look at the books in there, sit down at a coffee shop, watch people walk past. Have a look at your old magazine. Go to an art gallery. What could you do away from the internet, away from your phone, away from your devices, your computer, to inspire you? You'll be surprised what comes out with your creativity. I think I might do a video along the lines of styling some looks from vintage Vogues. I think that would be really fun. Definitely reminded me of the power of owning my creativity and not getting influenced so much by the digital world. I think that's going to look cool on there. I'm going to cut that off and then actually use the bottom on a different card. So let's do that now. So the third thing that diving back into my Vogues and my Vogues over the years has taught me is to reimagine what I already have. Especially when I left my first job in television, I wanted to go back to England, where I was from, and I just wanted to spend some time. I've been working since I was like 15, so I just wanted to spend some time being a young woman and traveling and, you know, going back to my roots. And so I went back to England and just wanted to chill out for a while. I'm traveling, I don't have a big budget, so I was really reminded of the power of being resourceful and thrifting, of course. I'd thrifted all my life, but when you're traveling and when you've got a small budget, you don't have a choice. You gotta rein it in. I was still escaping into the world of Vogue and enjoying that. I love British Vogue particularly. I just feel like it's a lot more creative, as is French Vogue. I was still diving into those magazines, but then I was going to the thrift stores and looking for things that I could reinvent with the pieces that I already had. I'd look at the editorials in Vogue and I would think, okay, well, I love this shoot. What do I love about it? I'd look at all the details. I'd look at all the aesthetics. And then I would be like, okay, how can I do a version of this that feels like me using what I've got? Over the years, it's really encouraged me, kind of by necessity, to prove to myself that you can have that Vogue aesthetic. And I think this is where I know this is where the whole concept of my brand Opshopulence really formulated. It was out of that necessity. It was out of not having a lot of money, but not wanting to give in to, well, why can't I look like a fashion magazine? Why can't I look like those models? Why can't I be just as glamorous in the clothes that I wear? When I was living overseas with my best friend Karen in the UK, one of my favorite memories was we went to this very well-to-do party. Everybody was dressed in fancy clothes and I was dressed in thrift, and my outfit cost me like 20 quid. And everybody was asking me about it. That was what really cemented in to me how much these magazines had inspired me and got into my consciousness, but had ignited my creativity. So I'd taken all of that study over the years unintentionally. I was learning to think for myself. I was learning to be creative using what was in existence, or very inexpensive, being resourceful. It continues to do that to this day. Even though I've had these Vogues for so long, and I haven't bought a new Vogue for years. It was really out of control for a while there. I had way too many. I can just tap back into these Vogues anytime, and they are still like such an incredible inspiration for me. I love that. I love that it's just this never-ending inspiration, because obviously we change as well, right? Like I was looking, say, at this 10 years ago, my mind and my influence and my experience is different now. So I'm seeing different things when I'm looking at these editorials. So yeah, it really helps your creativity, is my long-winded way of saying that. That looks cool, right? Now we just got to find an O to add in for the opulence. I found an O. So my fourth point, it kind of carries on from what I was just saying, but I think it's really, again, unintentionally, but helped me, and seeing my mother do this as well, it's really instilled this mindset of having a Vogue aesthetic, but for very little. In British Vogue in particular, I don't know if they still do it because I haven't bought a British Vogue for quite some years now, but I believe that my gorgeous niece is actually going to send me some soon. So we're excited for that. But they used to have this great editorial in the magazine called More Dash Than Cash. And I was thinking of creating a version of that here on my YouTube channel. And it was very thrifty, and that's what I loved about it. It was very sort of not classic Vogue-like, but it was really encouraging people to have more dash than cash and be creative and be resourceful. So I might call it more flash than cash or something like that. But it was always so inspiring to me, and just going through these Vogues recently, I found a few of them. I'll insert some pictures so you can see. It just reminded me like, oh yeah, adding, brooches to shoes, or turning a scarf into a top, or adding a trim to a skirt, like all the things that I love to do and that I do love to talk about as well, was sort of reiterated to me. So it just reminded me of this concept of, you can still have that Vogue aesthetic, or as I like to call it, opulence. It's really not about how much you spend, it's about how creative you can be. I believe in the underdog, taking things that are perceived as cast aside and not cool, and reinventing them and making them beautiful and making them glamorous. That's definitely what opulence is all about. I didn't realize that until just thinking about doing this video for you, was how much it has helped me create that concept of the Vogue aesthetic, but for very little. Now, my last point with what Vogue has taught me, or just fashion magazines at large. As I say, this is not a Vogue commercial, it's just my experience has been with this magazine. It could be any magazine that you choose, or any book. The language of fashion. I am a complete word nerd. I love words, linguistics, phrasing, writing, obsessed. Love it. Love a good pun, love a dad joke. But to me, there is something so poetic, so beautiful about the language of fashion. It's taught me some of my favorite words, like diaphanous, light, flowy, light as a feather, airy, fabric that's diaphanous, irreverence, ineffable. Like all of these words I would find over the years. I would be reading Vogue and I would be like, what does that word mean? So I would stop, put the magazine down and, you know, use a dictionary. But it really did make me think more. For me, fashion is very cerebral. It's taught me a lot. It's actually really expanded my consciousness, my fashion consciousness, and also just my intelligence level, my vocab. It's really tapped me in. But there is a certain language with fashion, and Vogue particularly. I find it really beautiful and poetic. I love the way that the journalists write. It's very creative, it's very clever, very witty. Particularly British Vogue, we're pretty good at wit and irreverence, if I do say so myself. It really taught me about the language of fashion, understand in my way how to connect to that, and then how to create my own story with it, if that makes sense. It's also taught me a lot about garments, garment construction, fabric, considered design, the details of things, attention to detail. Whenever I study the editorials in Vogue, particularly when Grace Coddington was at the helm of American Vogue, it was just, everything was so considered and so detailed, and that is definitely my personality. But I think being surrounded by these beautiful Bibles has really helped me to tap into my own storytelling. And I think it's, over the years, reading these magazines has really ignited that for me. And it's probably a big part of the reason I love writing so much, that I love making videos, that I love communicating, and that I love telling stories through the lens of fashion. I just think it's beautiful. But I've noticed a lot when I'm thrifting. Look how cute that looks. All of that intel, that study, I think I was unintentionally like going to university, Vogue University. I notice it when I'm thrifting. I just know things and I don't even know how I know. But it's those years of applied study, AKA obsession with fashion, that has, yeah, definitely taught me about cut, design, fabric, appreciating artisan culture, true couture. It's been an amazing journey. It really has. To make these cards as like a little ode to that, an ode to my journey, and to include that in my business has just felt really perfect. And all that's left to do now is to seal this with a kiss. So I'll just go put some lippy on. There we go. Perfect. Thank you for listening. I hope that that was enjoyable, aka it was a little bit random, but I just felt that I wanted to share some different ways that you can get inspired. And as I say, it doesn't have to be Vogue, it can be any magazine or book, but just try challenging yourself to get inspiration away from the digital and just see what comes out. Thank you so much for watching. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more cards to do, so I better keep going. But if you'd like to check out my store, it's opshopulence.com. I'm uploading lots of beautiful goodies there on the regular, so do check in and see if there's something that you like. I hand source everything with lots of love and care, and it's amazing seeing my business starting to grow and feeling all of the support from you babes. I'm truly grateful. It's a dream to do my own thing. So yeah, thanks for being here, and I will see you really soon. The next one, Fashion Month wrap up, definitely coming. I'm just diving in to the study this long weekend, so I'll report back next week. All right, loves. See ya.